my favourite people in Dili is my friend Nino. Nino is 23, he's from Akusi, and like lots of people from the districts of Timor-Leste, he came to Dili originally to study, and now to work. Nino is studying public administration at UNTL, and when he's not studying, he loves to play guitar. And on the weekends, he jams with his friends in a band. But what I really love about Nino is his smile. So check out this photo. Doesn't he have a fantastic smile? Now, I know Nino because he drives me to work every morning. He's a taxi driver, or a taxista, like we say here in Dili. And so driving around in a taxi with Nino has taught me a lot about Dili. He's managed to teach me a little bit of Tetin. I've taught him a little bit of English. But it's also raised a lot of questions for me. So because I'm an economist, I've been really interested in how much does Nino get paid? And how much does the owner of the taxi get paid? How much does petrol cost? So that inspired me to go out and do a survey of taxi drivers and owners in Dili, and to find out a little bit more information about taxis. So I took that information about taxis, and then I used a little bit of economics, or what I like to call Dilinomics. And I used Dilinomics to think about taxis in Dili, and to think if there's a way that the taxi industry could work a little bit better. Now you're probably thinking, why the hell is this guy talking about taxis? But the reason I'm talking about it is because it has a really important lesson for all of us. Because I think that if we want to make the world a better place, if we want to make Dili a better place, then it's not good enough just to have good values. We actually need to have really good information and the right analysis. And Dilinomics can help us get that information and can help us do that analysis so we can come up with solutions to the problems that we face. So the first question that I had when I was investigating taxis in Dili was, how much does a taxi ride cost? Now this might be a really, really obvious question to the Timorese in the audience and to the long-term Dili residents. But I tell you, if you're a Malay and you've just arrived in Dili and you get in a taxi, what you pay is a total mystery. So you might get in the taxi one day and somebody will charge you $2. And then you get in a taxi the next day and somebody might charge you $5. And you never know what you're going to pay. But if you can speak Tetin, or you've been in Dili a long time, or you're Timorese, then you'd know that actually taxi fares, it's pretty much a set price. And so I wanted to find out, how do they set those prices? How do you know that it's, exactly $2 from, say, Santa Cruz to Chamorro Road? How do you know that? And so I've been asking taxi drivers, how do they set those prices? And here's a little bit of what I found out. So every single morning, Nino picks me up from my house, I'm still half asleep, he takes me to work. And every morning I pay him $3 in a taxi. So where does that $3 go? When I surveyed taxi drivers, they told me that that money mainly goes to petrol, to paying the driver, and to the money that goes back to the owner. And so this graph shows you in a typical $3 taxi fare where the money goes. And so you can see that $1.50 of a $3 taxi fare goes back to the owner. This other big chunk of petrol, that's about $1.12 out of a $3 taxi fare. So that's quite a lot of money as well. And then the really small sliver up the top there, that's the portion that goes to the driver. So that's 38 cents. So that was the first thing that I found out about taxis in Dili, that when Nino drops me to work every morning and I give him $3, I'm not actually giving him $3, I'm giving him 38 cents. We can see that a large portion of the $3 taxi fare goes to owners. So then I wanted to find out a little bit more about what it's like owning a taxi in Dili. So I also went around and I spoke to a whole lot of different people who own taxis to try and figure out what are some of their costs that they face. So speaking to people, it looks like you can buy a taxi for between $5,000 and $8,000 in Dili. This might vary a little bit, and if any of you in the audience own a taxi or know somebody who does, then these figures might not match exactly, but this is what I found out from my survey. And your running costs for the year are just over $2,000, about $2,100. And those running costs include the salary that you pay to the driver every month, the registration that you pay to government, paying for an oil change, paying for repairs that might happen on some of Dili's more potholed roads, and other little things that happen along the way. But you also get a pretty good income stream. So you get about $6,000 in income a year. And that's the money that the taxi driver pays back to the owner every day after they've finished work. And so we can see that a taxi owner is making a profit of around about $3,900 a year. So there are definitely risks with owning a taxi. There's the risk that the taxi might have a crash. There's the risk that, God forbid, the taxi might hit somebody. There's a risk that the taxi might break down and it might never work again. So there's a few risks, but it looks like it's a pretty good business opportunity. And when I spoke to taxi owners, most of them agreed that they could pay back the cost of a taxi in a couple of years, in 2 to 3 years. So if it's such a good business opportunity, then why is my friend Nino driving a taxi? Why doesn't he own a taxi? What do you think? Have a little bit of a think for a second of why you think that somebody would be driving a taxi and not owning a taxi. And the answer's obvious, isn't it? It's money. You need the money to buy the taxi in the first place. That money, or the startup capital, that's not easy to come by. And those of you who've been in Dili for a long time know that startup capital, the money you need to start a business, it's not easy to come by. And so in economics, when something's not easy to come by, we say that it's scarce. And scarcity is one of the most important concepts in the whole of economics. So even if you forget everything else in this presentation today, just try to remember that. Now, scarcity is important because it really determines the value of something. So when something's scarce, like a diamond, then it's usually worth a lot of money. And when something's not scarce, like a bag of rice or an everyday item like that, then its value is a lot lower. Now, startup capital in Dili is scarce because banks in Dili and other financial institutions, they don't give many loans. The role of a bank, or the role of the financial system, should be to loan people money so that they can start up a business. So when you see a good business opportunity, like the business opportunity I just described with a taxi, then a loan can give you that startup capital. But that doesn't happen in Dili. The financial system doesn't work as well as it should. And banks don't give many loans because they find it too risky. They find it too risky because if the bank lends money to somebody and that person can't pay the money back, banks don't have a good way to enforce contracts. And there also isn't a good system for giving collateral, which is something that you promise to a bank in return for giving the loan. So what that sets up is, it's a financial system that creates a barrier. So imagine a big barrier running down here. And on one side of the barrier, you have people who have money already. And those people can take advantage of those good business opportunities, like the one that I just showed you for the taxi. And then on the other side of the barrier, you have people like my friend Nino and other aspiring entrepreneurs. So these are people who, they might see a good business opportunity, they might know that there's something really fantastic they could do, but they're stuck on this side of the barrier because they don't have that money to start a business. Now, the other effect that the financial system has is it makes money more expensive. So if you are lucky enough to get a loan from a bank, then the bank will charge you quite a high interest rate. So banks in Dili charge 12, 15%, sometimes even 20% and more. And they charge that high interest rate because of the risks that the banks have in lending that I talked about earlier, but also because money is scarce. This isn't just a problem for the aspiring taxi owners in the audience and other budding entrepreneurs. This is actually a problem for all of us, because the financial system not working properly actually affects the price of taxi fares. So you remember a couple of moments ago when I showed the slide with the pie chart, $1.50 out of every $3 going to taxi owners. Well, the reason that's such a high amount is largely due to the financial system. Because capital is scarce, it means there's not that many people accessing that business opportunity of a taxi, which means that the rents that the owners get from the taxi are quite high. So if we had a financial system where more banks gave out loans more easily, that would mean more people like my friend Nino being able to get a loan to buy a taxi. It would mean more people owning taxis. It would mean greater competition amongst taxi owners, which would mean that $1.50 out of every $3, that figure would come down, and the end result would be that taxi fares would be cheaper for everybody. And just in case you don't catch many taxis, then this is actually true for microlays as well. So the financial system has the same effect on the price of a microlay fare, which is obviously a form of transport that thousands and thousands of people use in Dili every day to get to work. So imagine if we could make the price of a microlay journey a lot cheaper for everybody. That would be pretty amazing. When I started this talk today, that might not be, talking about the financial system might not be what you're expecting me to talk about. We started talking about taxis, and I started investigating about taxis in Dili, started trying to analyse the problem. And when I first started looking into taxis, the financial system wasn't what I was thinking about either. I was thinking that taxi fares were quite high because they have to import the vehicles from Indonesia or Singapore, or there was a government regulation that was increasing taxi fares. But when I used a little bit of Dilinomics, went out and got the information and used some Dilinomics to think it through, the answer I came to was actually it's the financial system has the greatest effect on the price of a taxi fare in Dili. So here's my friend Nino again. So when I was talking to Nino about TEDx, I was telling him about this conference, and we were having a good chat. We were both talking about what we want to do when we grow up. And Nino said that his dream was to contribute to the development of this nation. He wants to finish his degree at UNTL, and he wants to contribute to the development of the country. Now that's a fantastic dream. But Nino can't do that if there are barriers in the way of him doing that. And that might be a barrier to him owning a taxi, it might be a barrier to him starting a business, or it might be a barrier to him getting a job. If we want to make Timor-Leste a better place, then we need to find a way to take away those barriers. And Dilinomics can help us get there. It can help us get there by looking at everyday problems in a different way and giving us the information and analysis we need to make the world a better place. Thank you.